this system, the European part and the rest, is obviously coming down. That is, the rate of collapse exceeds the rate of attempt to overtake the collapse. That means essentially that the entire European system in its present form is in the process of a hopeless degeneration. Now, this is something comparable to what happened to Germany in 1923. And they've caught themselves in a trap where the rate of collapse exceeds the rate of their attempt to overtake yesterday. So therefore, we're in a new situation, and the only solution in Europe in particular is Glass-Steagall, or the Glass-Steagall equivalent, with no fooling around. Straight Glass-Steagall, no bailouts, none. In other words, you have to collapse the entire Euro system. The entirety of the Euro system has to collapse. But it has to collapse in the right way. It has to be a voluntary collapse, which is like the Glass-Steagall process. This means the end of the Euro, really. The Euro system is about to end because you can't sustain it. Everything is disintegrating now in Europe. We can be rescued very simply by a Glass-Steagall type of operation, and then going back to the currencies which existed before. In other words, you need a stable system of currencies, or you can't have a recovery at all. Because if the rate of inflation is higher than the rate of your bailout, and what happens when you try to increase the bailout, you increase the hysteria. You increase the rate of collapse. In other words, the rate of collapse exceeds the rate of bailout. And now you have Spain and Portugal implicitly, the situation in Greece. Italy's going to go in the same direction. So the present system, which Obama is trying to sustain in his own peculiar way, is not going to work. There's no hope for the system. Nor is there any hope for the U.S. system in its present form. The remedies, the problems are somewhat different between Europe and the United States, but the nature of the disease is the same. They both have the same disease. It's called the British disease. It's hyperinflation. In other words, a rate at which the rate of inflation exceeds the rate of bailout in the short term, not the long term, the short term. And it's comparable to what you might study from November of 1923 in Weimar, Germany, at which the rate of collapse far exceeds the rate of bailout. And that's the situation we're facing globally. That's the situation in the United States as well. It's just a little less accentuated here. In Europe, it's panic already. Tomorrow it'll be panic in the United States. Or the equivalent. So now you're in a situation where all the bullshit is now ended. The only way you can avoid a rate of hyperinflation beyond the rate of hypercollapse is Glass-Steagall, or the equivalent. In other words, you have to save something. You have to save the essentials. Well, the essentials are you take all the things that go into the bailout category and you cancel them. How do you cancel them? Very simple. Glass-Steagall. Anything that is not fungible in terms of categories doesn't get paid. It doesn't get unpaid either. It just doesn't get paid. Because you remove these things from the category of things that you're responsible to pay. You're not responsible to bail out gambling. You're not responsible to pay out gambling debts. Now the gambling debts now are the hyperinflation. So now we might as well say it. The United States, among other nations, is hopelessly bankrupt. Unless Glass-Steagall, not this crazy thing about, Glass-Steagall Light or something, that's not going to work. We're now in a situation, and you've got the idiot factor, the global factor. The attempt now is to, if they can intimidate Russia and China, the argument is that they can control the world. They're going to control the world. They won't try to control the moon because they're not going to take responsibility for the moon. Only lunatics would do that. But this is the situation. This is what reality is. And what happens is the entire U.S. government leadership operation is beyond reckoning. It is collapsing. And they say, but we control the world. Ha ha, buddy, the world is collapsing. And there's only one thing you can do. The equivalent of Glass-Steagall. You take those accounts which are worthy, which are essential to society. You freeze the currencies, their prices, and no bailout. And you don't pay anything that does not correspond to a real credit. It's the only solution. The point has been reached. It's here. Now you have a dictatorship in the United States, an effective dictatorship, called the Obama dictatorship. The Obama dictatorship says, if you try to, don't bail us out, we'll shoot you. But what can a dead man do? Pay. Dead man cannot pay any bills. And you're at the point that all men who still are in bailout mode are dead. Because the rate of inflation or hyperinflation exceeds the rate at which you can bail out. In other words, you try to bail out, you'll get an immediate reaction, you'll get bigger losses than you thought you were bailing out. You're in a bottomless pit, very much like Germany, 1923, Weimar. And in any kind of hyperinflation, this is something you come to. And there's only one way to do it. Get rid of the bad debt. It's going to happen. Now we've got a situation, the French thing is not working, because it's not working, the new president is not working. And when he's not working, he may be not working in reality tomorrow. He may be gone, out of the street or something. But the entire world system is under crisis. It's a general breakdown crisis which is centered in the transatlantic community. That's where the center of the crisis is. And this bailout process in the United States, elsewhere, and so forth. You're getting a revolt in South America, in Brazil. There are attempts to revolt to get out of this thing. They're to abandon it. So in the United States, we're on the verge of a breakdown, a blowout. It can happen any time. When it will happen, we don't know, because we've seen this kind of thing before, as in 1923 Germany. November, December 1923, this was the situation. And it went on after that. But it's a breakdown crisis. And that's it. So all the bullshit has now just come to an end. Those who thought there could be a bailout, or they had some recipe that things were going to be fine, that things would be manageable, that's all gone. You're now relieved of that great burden. You need have no anxiety about the U.S. dollar. Why worry about it? Either it's dead or it's not. And the only way it's not going to be dead is by an end of bailout. That's the situation. The world has seen this type of situation before. The fact that the United States is big and that Europe is somewhat big does not relieve anybody of anything. The fact that somebody says we are the rulers, we control the system, and say, well, how about your debts, buddy? How are you going to get bailed out? If your rate of collapse exceeds your rate of growth of debt. That's where you are. That's where we all are. And some are intelligent enough to know it and recognize it and act upon that, and some are not. We don't know exactly where the breakdown point comes, but it's coming. That is because we're already in a system in which the rate of breakdown is greater than the rate of any bailout possible. And there's only one way you can do that. Cancel a whole category of obligations. Those that don't fit the Glass-Steagall standard, or the equivalent of the Glass-Steagall standard. Cancel it immediately. You don't really cancel it, you just don't pay it. You say, we don't pay gambling debts. And these are gambling debts. We don't pay anything on gambling debts. Present us something that's not a gambling debt. And be able to deal with that. But if you think that this system is going to continue and that you can find some way to get out of this problem, you cannot get out of the problem because you are the problem. Your failure to do this is the problem. And it's your failure. Don't blame somebody else. If you didn't force through Glass-Steagall, it's your fault. And it continues to be your fault. It's your mistake, which is continuing. And that's the situation we have in Europe. And that really is also the situation in the United States. Just take a case. What is the relationship of the United States economy to the European economy? The problem is located largely in the transatlantic community. The transatlantic nations. They're the ones who are running the world. They're the ones where all the gambling is going on, the real gambling. And this is the place where the debts accelerate far ahead of the rate of any possible bailout. This is called death, where the bodies stop moving. And therefore, we have no choice. No bailout. Glass-Steagall equivalent. Immediately. That's where we are. So all this chatter about this is going to work out, that's going to work out, we have this solution, we can go there and succeed, it's all crap, it's all gone. The body is dead. And you got to get a new body. But don't make it two body. But that's what we are. It's exactly the situation we have faced now. And there's no other discussion that really means much until we can decide to end the bailout and to absolutely cancel all illegitimate debt. That is bailout debt. You see, what happened is you were dealing with clinical insanity, which is mass insanity, which was increasing over the post-war period, especially since the Kennedy assassination and beyond. And this junk pile business, especially in the summer of 1971, was the turning point when the actual plunge downward began. And since that time, it has accelerated. The rate of inflation has insidiously accelerated. Then in the more recent time, after the cancellation of Glass-Steagall, then everything began to go wild. There was an interim period where there was an absorption of the effect of cancellation of Glass-Steagall. But then, in the more recent period, when the new Bush administration came in for 2 terms, then the thing really went wild. And that went wild because at the end of the administration of Bill signed on to cancellation of Glass-Steagall. And Bill's cancellation of Glass-Steagall, his role in that, is what set this into motion. Then after Bill left office, and you had 2 terms of the new Bush family, the Bush idiot, it crashed into an acceleration. The last effort to stop it was mine. And when my option was canceled. You had the next year, bailout plunge went full steam ahead. And since that time, this system as a whole was already in the process of getting ready to drop dead. And what has happened recently, we are now in the drop dead phase of the US and European economies. And there's only one solution. The solution is get rid of the illegitimate disease, the hyperinflation. Get rid of the hyperinflationary factor. Cancel the hyperinflation. Don't pay those debts. Don't cancel them, just don't pay them. You declare them outside the economy, outside the responsibility of government. We can no longer afford to sustain you. Therefore, you will have to find other remedies of your own. But don't steal. We may shoot you if you try that. That's where you are. It had to come. It has been coming. Look at the phases. We had, back with the death of Roosevelt. What did they do? We won the war, but they screwed everything up that time. What they do? They took all the assets which were classified as military or war assets. All these things that we had used for war. All the equipment that we had used for war. It was still there. It was still being produced. All we had to do was to convert it from war production to development of the economy. What did they do? Well, they said, we're turning everything over to Churchill. The new president, Harry S. Truman, and S as you know what. So they just said, turn everything over to Churchill. So all the plans for reconstruction in Russia, in China, and so forth, these things didn't happen. They were canceled. In the United States, the entire production potential of machine tools and things of that sort were canceled instead of putting them to work. So we went into a deep depression. We went into an awful fascist-like regime under Harry Truman. And that fascist regime continued throughout the 1960s, 50s, and 60s. Both. One with exception. Mrs. Roosevelt sponsored a presidential candidate who was elected and began doing all the right things. So they shot him. And they stopped doing those right things. That's the 1960s, middle of the 1960s. And the United States has been slowly going to hell together with Europe. You find the same thing in Western Europe. And the same thing in Eastern Europe. The collapse was caused by this British domination of the system. And there's been a progress of erosion of value since that time. And it marched. You think it's a long time. And it couldn't happen because it was a long time coming. But the long time coming was coming. And the consequences attending that were coming too. So the fact you spend a couple of generations, or a couple of decades, here and there, being fools, and you thought you were not going to be penalized for being fools, now the time when the penalties for fools have been delivered. You no longer have the ability to live under the present system. The exact day of extinction is not known, but the onrush of the extinction is now certain and early. When it's going to collapse on you, I don't know. But it's going to collapse on you very soon. In fact, it's already collapsing. The system is ready to disintegrate. And now is the time for us to do what I say we must do at last. It's gone all the way too long, and the time to end it all is come. And that's what we should think, And we shouldn't think about anything different to that, because anything different to that is an absolute waste of time and energy. The solution is obvious. Glass-Steagall now, instantly, real Glass-Steagall, not the fake variety. That will stop the crisis. And nothing else but that will stop the crisis. Then we're going to have to rebuild the economy. We can do that very simply by creating a big major program, and NWAPA will be the basis for that program. Otherwise, you haven't got a chance. You haven't got a prayer. You're riding a dead horse. And it's all coming on fast. And when you look at the situation from a world standpoint, especially the transatlantic standpoint, you see it very clearly. And that's the panic is out there right now on that issue. The entire system is collapsing. And we represent with what we put forth as policies. These policies we have presented are the only hope for this nation and for other nations too. There are no other hopes for civilization. Civilization as it has existed is on the verge of collapse. And the only thing to do is change the policy in the way we have indicated heretofore. And understand that long before you were born, your parents were stupid. Because when did this happen? It happened earlier, but we had a recovery in the ending of what we call World War II, and they screwed that up. And there have been some good efforts made, good directions along the way, but the net effect has been that there are no good directions in net effect. We've had good measures, good ideas, good attempts, but there's this resounding effort, the pounding of the feet. The system is going down. We don't care what you do. You may enjoy life today, you may enjoy it tomorrow, you may enjoy it the next day, but in the end we're going to get you. And that's what the sound is of the collapse. The footsteps of the collapse, which are now running faster than you can run. And there's one answer. Now, what does that mean? That means no more Mr. Nice Guy. We just simply insist that what has to be done, has to be done. There are no compromises. People who come up with compromises say, you're compromised. That's bad. You've got to get uncompromised. Glass-Steagall now. Rebuild now. Obama out of office now. The British, let them go to hell. We have to save civilization. And the time is now. Not some distant time down the line. We're facing it in Europe now. We're facing it inside the United States right now. And anybody who doesn't know that has to go a brain check if they don't understand that. That's the point we reached. At the time when at this condition, when the rate of acceleration of the deficit is what it is today, you've now reached the point you can't fool around anymore. You can't say we're going to propose this. We can't say that we're going to try this. You can't say we're going to try that. Because all these things are finished. It's like Germany in 1923. In November of 1923. There's nothing you can do about it unless you change the system. And the price the British charged in Germany was fascism. That was the price of recovery. 1923, the year of recovery. Not really recovery yet, but it was the year of fascism. And it had already been fascism at the end of the war. But then it was consolidated. The new forms, not the old right-wingers, but the new forms. They took over. And we had a war, a terrible war. Now we're back at it again. The system is dead, dying, not worth anything. If you were thinking of supporting it or trying to cooperate with it, you were wasting your time. Matter of fact, you were doing more damage than you were good. And that's where we stand right at this moment. We stand at this moment in that situation. And it's the unfolding of that situation that we face. And during this period of unfolding, of the last moments of the existence of this system, we have still maybe a chance to change it all now. But that means get rid of Obama. Get rid of these games. Get rid of, Glass-Steagall on the half shell.
Steagall off the door.
That's it. That's where we stand right now. Those are the realities we have to consider. Other things are not realities. We have very few options. And these are the options. Glass-Steagall, rebuild, Obama out. Without those measures, the United States is almost as good as dead.